Hello everyone, this is Jordi from Agents at Work, and we're here for a new episode with Tereza Tizkova from E2B. Hi Tereza.
Hi, Jordi. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. Actually, thank you for joining in such a sunny day in San Francisco. There's many things to do, and it's good that you are here to speak about AI agents.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk.
Excellent. So many people by now will have already heard about E2B. But for those who are new, what is E2B?
So E2B is a startup, and we are building infrastructure for AI agents. What it means practically, we are building cloud sandbox environment, which is like a small virtual computer for agents. One of the most common use cases probably is the agents generate code with LLM, and the code is executed in the E2B sandbox in a secure, isolated way. So it's like code interpreter, let's say. But the environment is much more useful for many more use cases. For example, computer use agents that are now popular, or web app generation, or running evals. It's just like very universal. Like as you give agent the sandbox, it's like giving them its own virtual computer. It's basically a micro VM. So that's our product. It's very low level. It's easy to combine with different LLMs, different frameworks. It's more like the infrastructure layer that's useful for the agents.
Okay, so it would be an infrastructure company, and then your product is basically at some point from some program that it's an AI agent, you need to spawn and run maybe some other runtime in another language. So you have like some other code that you want to run, and then this is needed for AI agents because a lot of the code that they need to run did not exist by the time that the agent is created, but it's like generating at runtime. Is that right?
Yeah, that's one of the of course, generate stochastic code that is untrusted by definition. You don't know what the agent generates, what files it will try to access in your computer, in your operating system. So you really need some degree of isolation. Of course, you can run the code in Docker or in other solutions, but I think the micro VMs, it's actually better for the extra level of security. Like it protects your kernel from any like malicious code potentially. So that's just like one benefit. Of course, there are other features because we are building this specifically for AI agents. We didn't exist before all the like AI wave. So we are thinking also about what features we need to build for LLM powered apps. So for example, persistence, right? The environment needs to be persistent, you need long running sandboxes. So many features like that. But of course, the security it's a big selling point, I think, especially for bigger customers.
Okay, so let's move the clock 2 years back. We have these LLM machines, they start outputting text, and people say like, wow, this is amazing. Can you write me a Python program? And they actually did. People are like, wow, this is crazy. I just copied it to my editor, I click run, and it works. And then that was people getting the output of an LLM and putting it into like some file and executing it locally in the runtime. And what your company does is like, well, the LLM can then call a tool and say like, this is the code that I would like to. We have seen this in some of the big lab providers. So for example, this Canva idea of, like the LLM is outputting and out of the blue opens something that runs code. That's code that it's not running in the client side. We don't even know what language it is. Usually it's Python, but it's in the backend of the place. You can just interact with it in the front end. So that's what your company is doing. Like it's allowing any LLM or any program to run specific runtimes and code in a safe way.
Yeah, essentially, I would say that. Yeah, of course, you can
Excellent.
always self-host it too. That's, I think, also useful because many companies just want to self-host. So yeah, but we're giving the ability to make the code of the agent actionable, let's say.
Okay, so you could, as you said, like run this with Docker, and that comes with a lot, like hell of problems, plus like big packages, like developing that, it's hard. And then you're saying like, we can simplify this. I have seen companies doing it with something like Wasp, for example, having this runtime environment that's like, okay, give me code and I will compile it for Wasp. And Wasp actually already has like some runtimes for this. With E2B, you said that you can self-host it. What are you self-hosting?
You can self-host E2B because we are completely open source, also the infrastructure, so you can just take it and I think now you can self-host it on GCP and soon it will be available on AWS. So you can just like run it on your own servers, let's say.
So for people that maybe they are not like infrastructure engineers, and for them, Amazon Web Service, it's the UI. Like they go to the UI and they just say like, okay, I want to run a new Lambda. Okay, so they copy and paste their code there and it just, they click run and it runs, and then they have a URL and they are able to hit it. But many people don't know like what's behind that, like how is that built. So that's actually the runtime and the infrastructure layer that you are providing. And on top of what you're saying is like, we have open sourced it and you can run it in your machine. And then you, I guess like what I was asking is like, how is that organized? Like there's something like an orchestrator, and then it gets like requests with the code itself. And then it spawns like some kind of Docker or some kind of, like what virtual environment do you use for like those kind of programs?
Yeah, I will try to answer more maybe like top down. So we have the sandboxes, the environment, and then we have SDK that is used, the developers, like our users use to control the sandboxes, to start the sandboxes. So like the E2B SDK is basically also what you would call the product. And yeah, so you work with the SDK, and when it's detected that like the LLM code is produced and needs to be run, the sandbox starts in like a few milliseconds, a few hundred milliseconds, and it starts a small micro VM, like virtual machine in the cloud. So that's how it works. I think when you mentioned Lambda, it's like possible alternative for running the code. I think sometimes we got customers who started building their own runtime with Lambdas, and then they like find out it's difficult or it needs a lot of maintenance, so they switch to E2B or they like search for other solutions.
Yeah, 100%. Like most of the time for engineers, when they listen to like really high level abstraction of conversations, it's like, oh, this is exactly the same as. So for Lambda, they go say like, oh, but I can do that with Docker. And you're like, no, Lambda has its usage, like for real. Like that's one of the biggest products in Amazon Web Service. And the same with E2B. Like many people may say like, oh, but we don't need a new thing for agents. Like I can use what I already had, like Docker or Lambda. But AI agents have their own complications. What would you say that are those complications that make your product like shine in the environment of AI agents?
Yeah, so one that I mentioned is the security. Another that is very related is isolation. So each sandbox instance, each E2B sandbox is like isolated from the others. So if you have, I don't know, so one of our users is Perplexity, for example, they have like millions of users, and each user needs to run the code, run what they're doing in a separate sandbox instance. You can't let the code in one sandbox interact with the others, right? So the isolation layer is very important. I think it's also big benefit is the speed. The firecrackers, they are very fast. It's like battle tested, and it starts in, I think currently until 200 milliseconds. So that's important because from like traditional software without LLMs, people have standards for like the apps running fast, right? You need something like, you need to start the sandbox immediately. So speed is probably a benefit. I think also scalability, like even that you are building it like with cloud solution that allows like to easily build for like end users and scale it to like millions of sandboxes. You can have like many sandboxes at once. That's important, I think. Also for use cases like testing, if you run tests of either LLM output of, like what the LLM produced, if you want to test and you need to run simultaneously many tests at once, you also do it in separate sandboxes, and you need to do it all at once. So the scalability is big benefit. And I think then also like features, like you can connect the sandbox to internet, you can upload data there, you can have file system, you can like store things in the sandbox, or like upload data, then download it back from the sandbox. So that's, I think, very practically useful. Another thing that is like good to mention, probably you can customize it before. Like you don't need to install everything, all the packages from scratch every time, right? You can like prepare, you can make custom sandbox and prepare like what packages are already there. Or for example, for computer use agents, you can have sandbox prepared with graphical interface. So that's like making it custom, that also helps.
Nice. I think that many times I like to think about second order effects. And if 5 years ago you have told me that my mom would be running more code than I ever wrote, I would not believe it. Like new code. But now, for example, she's a user of Perplexity.
Nice.
And you can see the effect of, well, every time that she queries the stuff, there is some code that it's generated, because it's not just like, give me the data that it's out there. It's like some post-processing to answer your question. That's code that it's running in E2. It's newly generated. Like my mom now, it's running more new code that I ever wrote 15 years ago. So it's pretty crazy for me to see that. Have you seen that? Like that has to impact in the scale that you are running. How How long is since you started E2B? When was the company formed?
I think almost 2 years ago now. I think there is one moment that we usually mention is the start, and it was the founders Vasek and Tom. Vasek is the CEO, Tom is the CTO. They are from Czech Republic, from a small town. And I think Vasek just mentioned in another podcast how they published something at the beginning of the agents hype. Let's say they made some like platform for agents. It wasn't even like E2B now, of course. It was like different. And Greg Brockman actually retweeted something they built. So they started to get a lot of notifications, a lot of hype, and that's how they knew like, okay, let's take it seriously. Let's hire more people. They got investment, and yeah, they hired me and more people. So that's how it started. And I think it took many months until E2B was what it is now. Like, of course, we iterated like probably every startup does a lot. We talked a lot to a lot of users. That's why we started in San Francisco to get the initial, like, basically talking to users again and again and learning what they want, what problems they have. And that's how E2B started. I think the first, or for a long time, I think E2B was like really equivalent to code interpreter because it was the first very particular use case that people understood. We built cloud sandbox, we built something like virtual computer. People are like, okay, what's that? Why is it needed? It's very abstract. So we started seeing like running code. That's the big use case that is very tangible. And code interpreter is something already known from like traditional software. So like we started selling E2B as code interpreter. And now I think it's pretty obvious that it's needed. So we are like marketing it again as more like abstract level, like code, cloud sandbox environment, I don't know, computer use and like all these different use cases.
I really like this kind of stories where, like, there are like two people around the world, like in what you say, like small town in Czech Republic, and then they just find something and say like, well, they're able like to see the future. They're like, well, I think that this is going to be big. And then someone else has noticed, and through the X platform, they are just able to amplify it. And then they take into the opportunity, and now they build like such a big company like E2B. And this is just the beginning. So E2B still needs to grow like quite a lot. So I am like really excited to see where the company goes. So do you know like the first kind of customers, what they were looking for in E2B?
I think, yeah, so I would say we have two types of customers, of course. We focus on individual developers, indeed, like the community, and yeah, like individual people using E2B for their, I don't know, maybe personal projects, maybe for their work, but not like big companies. And then the real customers, like enterprises, like now Hugging Face, like very, very big companies that are using it on bigger scale. So that's two types. I would say at the beginning, it was just the first type mostly, which is individuals, sometimes small startups, but I mean, the agents was just starting, so there weren't even like that big use cases. So yeah, first customers were individuals, and I would say a lot of them just were playing around because the agents were still being developed. It was crazy because the market didn't exist at all. For me, it was like so interesting to do the marketing or like try to grow it when the market was growing at the same time. So I feel like we were also, I think it's maybe too ambitious to say we were like creating the market, but we try to help create the market, educate the people, what is possible, what will be the future, talking a lot to like developers and showing what types of agents exist and what they do. Yeah, then we started getting customers like startups building with agents. It was tricky because a lot of them were also just starting to build and were experimental and pivoting a lot. So it was like changing quickly. Now it's more established. Yeah, and it was usually, of course, like developers, most of them. Like developers is still the users now, but I think now what is different 2 years after is that the customers are sometimes non-technical companies in the sense that it can be like, I don't know, sports organization or like HR company, and they just have one department focusing on agents, or the CTO that discovers E2B. You know, it's not like software team, it's not like very technical, but at the beginning it was just like very, very like developer focused.
Yeah, I can imagine that it was rough because it's what you said. Like you were really early, and it was clear that this was coming. You were able to like project it properly. But for many people, like even agents, they thought that LLMs were a chat. And even so, like it took people a lot of time, even when the capabilities are there. And then you did the bet of models are going to keep improving. code is going to be generated more and more by LLMs. And many times, even like not only in a copilot kind of way, but there's an agent that it's doing something. Let's build something for that goal. And I'm sure that people were like, well, but where are those agents? Like those agents don't exist. And I tried ChatGPT 4 and it fails. And then you just wait 6 months. So did you try the new version? It can already do like all these new capabilities. How was that for you? Like seeing like, for example, Llama 4 was launched was released yesterday.
Yeah.
And there are going to be like new capabilities that come from there that make your product even more useful. And Llama 4 is not even like the end of the road. Like month after month, we're going to get more and more of this. So how do you plan for this in a company?
Plan, or when we do like a strategy, what to do, of course, we always leave some degrees of freedom for these launches, or I mean, time-wise, also capacity-wise, because it's always like we are in the middle of something, then new LLM drops, and we are like, okay, there is always this discussion like, what does it mean for our product for the future? What will developers start building now? What will be different? I think with Anthropic, it's a good example because they always, I think they're often the first to release something like computer use, then like artifacts, MCPs. They're like the leader for in the developer space. So when they release something, we know, okay, maybe then OpenAI will release something similar, and yeah, open source versions will come. So we always try to think like, what does it mean for us? Usually it's a good thing for us. That's that's like lucky probably choice of product. Like, LLMs improving are actually a good thing for us. Yeah, I think it's the challenge that we need to be good at is trying to predict how the market will grow, where it's gonna go, and catch like the usual use cases that people are building, because I feel like it's always like a new experimental use case with agents than like the established ones. So now the experimental is probably computer use, right? So we always try to think, what does it mean? Like put it in the context.
Yeah, like something that I really like that you just said is this idea of LLMs getting better. It's good for our company. And that should be the test right now to know if a company, like you should long it or short it. Like people who are betting with, like we are really good because we solved this problem that LLMs cannot do. We will see in the future. But people who say like, well, when the LLM gets more capable and my company gets better, like it's yours, it's a really good thing. For computer use, like it's something that you support too, because we were talking until now about running code. So you just like give some code and it runs in sandbox in your platform, or you can self-host it. Can you do things like computer use?
Yeah, we even have our own example of it because we're building like side projects that like show how E2B is used, and one of them is computer use agent that uses the E2B sandbox as environment for, I don't know, using computer basically, or also browsing the web. So yeah, our environment is good for that also. So that's one use case. I think this use case, it still needs some time until getting in production. Like it's more still experimental, and there's already a lot of competition, like Windows desktop agents and yeah, all that. But of course, we also can do this use case. But I would say like much bigger is still running the code.
And this code, it's usually like short scripts that people are doing, like something like Lovable and these kinds of companies that, okay, like let's create a website. And then, you have an agent that creates the website and needs to render it and execute it. Like it's really good for debugging. Like agents are really, really good at, like execute things, see the error and then like fix their problem there. Or it's more like people are writing specific programs for data analysis. Are they doing things like interacting with the real world? What kind of programs are there?
I think the answer depends on the iteration, on how is the role of the human in the loop, right? Because you can generate the whole program and render it, or you can just like iterate with the agent. So I think that's like also a product question. I prefer still like frequent iterations, like when I'm using products like deep research, for example, which is now like the big agent thing, the big use case, popular deep research agents. So I prefer if it's more iterations with the end user. Like if the agent gives me something and I can give feedback, I think it's still good at this stage. So it can be shorter code snippets, it can be like whole programs, of course, longer scripts. It really depends on how the product is built, I would say. Yeah, but I think like with longer contexts, of course, we will be able to see like much more like bigger code bases being run, and it's gonna get crazy.
I heard you in other interviews talking about the data analysis kind of thing. something that is curious for me is that data analysis usually like involves data, and that means like like bandwidth, like transmission of stuff for crunching the numbers. Is this a problem right now in the platform, or usually like it's that analysis of like small CSVs versus like we have here like 3 GB of data, or I have a video that it's like 3 gigas and I need to just like process it in your platform?
Yeah, I think of course, it depends on what tier the user is on. So we support like, of course, big files. We can connect the data somehow like dynamically. So there's many ways. And again, it depends on like what the use case is. But I think, for example, Julius AI is good use case or good example of product that can like really analyze really huge files of data. I tried it on like millions of rows. I was like testing it, and the agents are already there, I would say. So yeah, we support also like a lot of data to be uploaded, because that's one of the frequent use cases for companies, obviously, to
Yeah,
automate.
so far, like analyzing data and getting insights from it, like plots and things like that, it's one of the main use cases. And even what you said about like the first autonomous agent out there seemed to be research one. So this idea of I just execute something that goes around the web, fetches information, like pre-processes and give it to me at the end. For the other kind of agents, I think that we're still early, but you can see like more and more things appearing. For example, on coding and things like that. And as you said, like this idea of iterative approach, it's something that works really well for humans. So for example, if we want to go to the moon, we don't just like say like, okay, so boom, here is the plan. Going to the moon, like you actually go and say like, okay, what do I need steel? Where do I get the steel from? And like multiple checks. So that's something that applies to agents too. And I see many people that fail to realize this. Like they imagine like, okay, no, it's going to be the ChatGPT 5. It's going to just make the plan at once. And you're like, well, most of the time you want to test things, and your platform is really good for
Of
that.
course. Yeah, I
And
think
right now, what are you most excited that people are doing in your platform and that are enabled by the latest models? Like something that 1 year ago could not have happened.
I would say the deep research got really probably improved with models. Of course, it's still not perfect, but I think the limitations now are not that much on the model side. I would say it's still more on the product side, or from my experience. Yeah, I was testing like Manus, of course. U.com is like has a deep research agent in beta. Also Perplexity, right? I don't know what else. Like there is like a lot of them now. So I'm really excited for that, because I was working at McKinsey before and doing all these like big reports, big decks, and now I see the agents doing it in a few minutes, and it makes me very happy that I could be replaced if I went back in time. Yeah, but I think the problem there is like how do you iterate with what I want, because the agent processes like so much data from the internet so quickly, like really big chunks of text. So that's not really the issue, but the issue is like, what exactly do I want, or what sources are good, like some fact checking of the sources or the direction. It's like working with a real human assistant for that, right? It's like you need to specify, because I think every user has like very, very specific like goal what to do. So I think if they can like improve that, that would be really cool. But yeah, for example, we can help render the charts there also as well in our sandboxes, so that makes the output like presentable, because you have consistent format, you have your analysis is like in consistent way, and you can do it, let's say, in-house with the agent. So yeah, that's like
Okay,
I think so.
so this is a call for all the developers listening to this, and they don't know what to build next. So right now, the models are not the limitation. It's actually like developers trying this stuff and trying to figure it out, like the rough edges. So if they can start to think about, like how would improve things like deep research, now it's a good moment for that.
Yeah, I think it's a bit subjective, of course. Maybe it's just me, but I think like a lot of cool technology is already there. Like it's crazy what the LMs can already do. I think it's still maybe lacking, like it takes time to build a great product, right? Because at the beginning, everyone was building agents and doing the agents, and it's like we know the agents can be autonomous or like have the potential like technically, but like I think what makes a difference if you're gonna make it as like a startup or as a company building with agents, is like how you build the UI, the UX. Like that's the real thing that matters. Yeah, but okay, that's what I think.
And right now, like you are sandboxing things in the cloud, do you plan to add these capabilities locally? Because we have like pretty powerful machines, most of the developers. So there is like a lot of usage that can come from I run it in my own machine. For example, I am at Cursor and I am writing some stuff in Python. And then it says like, well, do you want me to run this tool? And I said like, well, let me check. Are you removing files? Well, I don't want that because that's my file system. But if it was sandbox, I would be happier to give more control over the LLM because I would say like, well, at least you cannot damage me. Is this something that is in the roadmap?
You mean like running E2B locally? I
Yeah.
think
Like actually running the orchestrator and being able, for example, to connect my cursor. So when I am using the copilot or the agent in cursor, it's sandboxed.
I think it's not on the roadmap right now, but I think Cursor could actually implement E2B. I think if they self-host it, that would be basically what you're asking, right? But yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure technically, to be honest. Like if they wanted to use E2B now, like what would be the like how would they use it? But yeah, I think
Okay, what if I wanted to implement an MCP of E2B? Do you have one that connects with the platform right now?
yeah, we have our own MCP server. It's on our GitHub. Yeah, and we're actually I think there is a lot of like, lists of MCPs and stuff like that, and we are there also. So there is like I think a few steps how to do that. But yeah, we support working with MCPs. I think that's also what's really popular now, right? Because of the developer community, just there is like this silent agreement that people just adopted and said, okay, let's go MCP. And yeah, I think that's another great thing for the future.
Something that I was always curious about your company is that there's a lot of stuff that it's open source. Do you think that it's something that helps you? Because there are many people that may say like, well, but that people can run them themselves. And you're like, yeah, but running this at scale, it's hard. Like it's not something that you want to do. Like you want E2B to be the experts that do that for you. For local stuff, it's okay. Like for example, the cursor thing that I said. But for production, maybe, like lead the experts that are fighting that problem every day, do it. Do you think that it helped E2B to grow, the fact that you open source it?
Yeah, I think it helps for different reasons. At the beginning, it helped a lot to get like trust from developers. Of course, when something is open source, like first benefit is trust. That's still I think what's true today. Second thing is being transparent because it's AI and there is always someone skeptical about AI, about how it works, what is in the background. I think that helps like the transparency. And other thing is also the community aspect, like when it's new market and new use cases, like people love to experiment with that, and we are building these examples like web app generation or data analysis, like different E2B use cases, and we have them on the GitHub so people can really see how the app is built, so it can inspire also the developer of the agent. I think like people always ask if it's like risky to be open source, or someone always asks that too. I think not, because there's like so many things. It's not just the code, right? The product is not just the code base. So yeah, but of course there is now like competition. The market is growing. We have seen first competitors. Yeah, if we are open source, of course they always go and see what we do. So that's fine.
Yeah, of course. Like this knowledge, it helps disseminating the knowledge. But as you said, like the company, it's never the code. Like most of the
Yeah.
time, there is like so much to be built around. And just the capacity to be able to say like, I am Jordi, I am a small startup, I want to run some programs. And you say like, okay, yeah, you can do it on our platform. And then Perplexity comes and say, hi, we're Perplexity. We want to run like millions of times per day. And just like, yeah, okay. So that's not something that, like me deploying in a EC2, instance in Amazon, good get. Okay.
Yeah.
And for like developers right now that want to try these things, what's the easiest way to start?
To start with E2B,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's good to go to our GitHub and try some of these examples, like computer use agent or web app generation agent that I mentioned, and maybe check the code base and what they want to build. Yeah, it really depends if you want to just like play around. Like, of course, we had a hackathon recently, so people were just like building in one day with E2B, getting into it like really, really quickly. Some guy built like a hardware robot that was like reading problems and solving them and running the code in E2B. So that's like, yeah, it's many fun use cases that you can do quite fast. Yeah, but always like the start is usually our landing page, docs, and GitHub, I would say, the usual.
So for the hackathon that you said, was it organized in Prague?
Yes, because we are operating from San Francisco, but we opened a Czech office in Prague because a lot of the core team is from Czech Republic, and we have also great engineers from Berlin, which is close. So there's like a smaller, let's say, AI hub, I think, in Europe. So the hackathon was like this big introduction to the Czech community, and it was really nice.
Yeah, like I think that you are on AI one of the biggest companies and one of the most promising ones in the AI era in Europe. That means like from all companies in Europe. There is a couple more, like, well, there's more than a couple. No, there's Mistral, for example, that it's another like a big lab that is European,
Yeah,
and then
Mr. Doing
Lovable, that it's also from Europe.
Sweden,
So
right?
it's cool to see, like, like, yeah, we all have presence in San Francisco because you have to be here, but it's good that, like, also like spread this kind of knowledge, and that there is talent all over the world. So if you can hire them, like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, Europe is really, I think, still underrated because, of course, there are the regulations, the AI Act, and people are making fun of that. It's difficult, like from the regulatory point of view. Like in the Czech Republic, there are ongoing discussion about like how to improve the startup ecosystem, how to better support like better conditions for employee shares, stock options, right? If you want to build startup, like it's from this administrative point of view also, it's difficult. Second thing is the mindset, right? Like I think here in San Francisco is just more ambitious, totally. People like even I would say even like delusional people in a good and bad way sometimes. Like everyone is like founder of something. I think yeah, it was very visible at the hackathon because here there's like so many events that people sort of take it for granted or like optimize what events to visit. In Prague when we did the AI hackathon, like there aren't many hackathons to choose from. It's more like exceptional for the people and they really appreciate it. And a lot of people arrived at like 8 a.m., which is like super surprising. It's like super early. It was already full in the morning and were like really locked in, sitting in like one spot all day and really hacking. So it was really like I feel like they take it very seriously when you do event in Prague because it's like more special.
I saw a thread on X that you did, like explain like all the cool projects. What, like some of them, did you already have any idea that E2B was going to be used this way, or there are some of them that really surprised you? It's like, wow, I didn't think about this.
Yeah, I think one of the winners built MCP server with E2B. So like they built some like UI to connect MCPs and use E2B for that. It was really cool. Then like when I mentioned the robot, of course it was like some like robot going around and solving examples. That was like really cool. Yeah, and then there were like the usual use cases like data analysis, deep research. So it was funny that it matched what is being built, like what I see on Twitter, what I see in San Francisco. And I was positively surprised that like the smaller community matched these like recent trends and were able to like spot what's actually useful. I was like really surprised in general how good the submissions were.
And something that you always mention is that you're an infrastructure company. The AI, it's like on the other side. It's the one just creating the code and executing it. I have a couple of questions there. That the first one would be, can you tell from the generated code what kind of LLM created it? Like, do you see a lot of, like, for example, the distribution of failing code? I would like to see how that looks. Like every time that someone says like execute this and there is an error, I don't know if you have data of what model generated that.
I think it doesn't depend that much on the LLM, but on if the LLM is a reasoning model, right? Like, for example, yesterday when Llama 4 launched, or like, I don't know if it was launched or if it was like accidental because it felt a bit weird on weekend, right? And they launched some LLMs that aren't focused on reasoning, so we added them to our apps for like to generate web apps, to generate, I don't know, script for data analysis. And they didn't perform that well because the model is not its like primary purpose, which is still fine. Like we tried and it can sometimes fail, sometimes it does the code well, but it's not like the what it's for. So of course I think it depends like if the model is trained for reasoning or not, but I think there are not that big differences between LLMs or that I would experience myself. I experience like differences for text probably, like Claude Sonnet is really great, but I think it can be also a bit subjective and it's changing, so difficult to say.
It may be a bit early for this, but do you have versioning? So I'm able to send you some code and say, like, execute this. Then it fails, and it's like, okay, this is V2 of the same code. So you are able to trace how many iterations you need for it to work?
Yeah, I think, like, yeah, you could do that, of course.
Okay, but it's not built in by default right now, no? So every time that I execute something, it's a new thing.
I'm not sure what you mean.
So there is no way to tie the different versions of the same code. So I used your SDK and I said like, okay, I want to run this code. and imagine that it fails. I receive the result and I say to the LLM, listen, fix this. Then it needs to give me all the code again and say like, okay, please, E2B, run this new thing. And you don't have any idea that it's linked to the first iteration,
but
or you do?
I think in the sandbox you can reference the previous code. Like when you have persistence and you run it for longer, like of course you can like reference what was there before. So I think that should be possible.
Okay, so how does it work? Because the APIs that I have seen in the SDK, like you just put the code there, but do you have something like Git where I can say like, okay, this is the project that I want to download, so it can like update the code, or no? Every time there's this new code or this virtual machine that I want you to run.
I mean, like connecting some repo and letting E2B just work, like iterate on that, or with E2B, or
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. I mean, again, it's not like like E2B is a bit separated from this problem, so I think you need to have like agent that is able to to scrape the data to get the code base to work with that. I think like the sandbox is a bit like separated from that, but of course we just like the environment that is running and supporting this. But yeah, I think
Yeah, I was asking because your company is really well positioned for providing this kind of data at scale or even per user. So, I would be really, really interested in saying like, well, I would like to know from my models, which one needs to retry less. And then you say, well, Jordi, you can build that. And I can, but then everyone who's interested will do the same. We have to rebuild it. And I think that if the platform like provides it, like there's some value there.
you mean like some like iteration over the code and like self-fixing.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to self-fix it. Like my LLM will fix it, but I will be able to trace it. So I will say like, okay, I just changed the model. Is it better or worse than before? Am I getting like more compiling errors or more logical errors? And these kind of things.
Yeah, I think you should be able to build this already. I think some of our users are maybe doing something like that. Yeah, and then there is like a separate thing is like monitoring in the sandbox, like monitoring the errors. I think we are also working on better monitoring and tracing, of course, but yeah, it's a bit different problem. But yeah, I think
Yeah, it's always hard.
yeah.
And do you know if people rerun the same virtual machine multiple times? Or usually it's like every time the agent creates all the code. Like are people reusing the code that it's created?
Reusing for what?
So right now, most of the LLMs that I do, for example, in ChatGPT, I ask always the same thing. I go there and say like, listen, I just want to like, transcribe this video or change this. And then they give me a script that is one off. But I use it so many times that I added it to my ZSH RC in
I
my
think it's a
program.
good question. I think it's a good question. That's also, I think, what's missing in like Claude or ChatGPT currently, right? To have some like meta level of what you are asking and what prompts you write, if that's what you mean, or that's like problem
Yeah,
I'm experiencing as well, like how to optimize, how to like look proactively at what the user does, what it's asking, and make it like maybe save the processes. So I'm not really sure what's the best product now. I've seen some being built, but
yeah, no, I think that there is no product for that yet, but it's something that you can see how programming for humans evolved. So at the beginning, it was like I write a program every time. Then it's like I have subroutines that I shared between my programs. Then it's like I have libraries that are like more complex that, like I share among all my services. And then I have services that I reuse in all my systems. And I guess that with LLMs, it's going to go in the same direction. But right now, what I have seen is that most of the time, people are just like rerunning all the code, and the code that it's sandbox, it's not indexed in any way where I can say like, do I need to do whatever? I already have a sandbox application for that. Then let me just change the input for the new one, and it already works. That's not
I mean,
happening
right.
need to be
It's
yet,
like
right?
different way of interacting. Yeah, I think it's difficult even with the vibe coding. That's still probably one of the
Oh yeah.
trickiest part. Like really focus on what small part you need to change, right? And really like track it and don't change like the whole code base or like a big code snippet. Yeah, I think that's a tricky
Actually,
one.
a good slogan for E2B would be like, let your LLM vibe code in a safe way.
Yeah, I think people don't really like vibe coding, or like there is this, I think among developers, it's like another trend, let's say, that's not really, probably not very
Yeah, yeah.
popular
There
to
is
say
quite
it
a
like that.
stigma there. You can see like for early time founders, the ones that are like at early stage, they say like, this is the best thing ever. Like I can do like 100 iterations in 1 week. But then for
Yeah.
people who are working with bigger systems, it's like, I don't want this close to my code ever.
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
of course, like,
people still, it's not like they don't trust it, but I think, for example, now our infra engineers and like there are many problems that you just need to solve yourself. It's like much more complex than just the code, right? So yeah, but of course it depends what you build. Like if you're building, I don't know, apps for like B2C, I've seen new companies that are built just with Lovable or Replit, like no writing code at all. So that's really cool. What type of product? Like we are very technical, so the problems are like probably difficult to completely outsource.
and I guess that in a company so edgy like yours, there are like many things to solve. And one of them it's pricing. Being an infrastructure company helps you with pricing because like, well, we know how to price this thing.
Pricing, that's like big difficult topic. I think you see like the cloud providers and their pricing, it's like all like science and like very complicated. And I'm like less surprised by that now because for us it's like not easy how to set the pricing and what tiers to do and what makes sense for both the user and us, right? So it's like open-ended problem. But yeah, what was the question, sorry?
No, I was asking about if being a company that is facing infrastructure have like some privileges because it's like, okay, we're working with
Yeah.
pricing, for example. It's a big problem for AI agents. Like people don't know how they're going to price this thing. I don't know if like if
Oh,
people who are doing AI agents, it's like, should it be value based? Should it be time that the agent is running? And for the cloud, it's hard. But for AI agents, it's like because nobody even knows how to
yeah,
price that thing yet.
exactly. Like you have many variables, like exactly time or like what do you do, how intense it is, yeah, or like some fixed, also fixed pricing, right, and the scale. So there's many variables to decide. I think for us, like it's easy, of course, because we're infrastructure product, so like the retention is good, right, and like yeah. But I mean, yeah, for agents, it's probably difficult. Yeah.
And something that I would like to see someday is like some report from your company that has information about stats. So, for example, how big are the programs? What's the distribution of lines of
Mhm.
code per program? And actually see the progression. Like, are LLMs able to every time handle like more complex code? How long do they run? Are we moving to a wall where, like the code that is generated by the LLM, it's
Oh
expanding in
yeah,
time or it's like shorter? Things like that. I think that they could be really, really interesting for the community in general.
that's interesting idea actually because we could be like unique in like having this data. Of course, it's difficult from the like compliance point of view, right? Like we would need to get these data from our users. But yeah, I'm actually thinking it would be interesting. Yeah, I think definitely
I
like
think
change.
it's something that could also help shape how LLMs evolve. So it's something like if I was a big lab, I would be really
Mhm.
interested in seeing like this kind of. I know that we have already too many benchmarks, but
Mhm.
one more is going to hurt us. So then that could be something that actually helps on, like what's my LLM good at? It's really good at short, fast scripts. Can it deal with like longer code? And like be able to do logical stuff that it's not longer but runs for longer time. That means like more
Mhm.
time for like finding the bug at runtime. So I think that you are really well positioned for that.
Yeah, like I think that's a good point because I also have questions like with longer context for the LLM, for example, like how is even like distributed, like where the LLM looks and how it can understand, even if it can like grasp all the context, all the code, like how well it actually processes and how it follows the instructions. So that would be interesting. I think also difference between running different languages. Like for example, we have products just like running R a lot. That's for scientists usually. That's very popular. So maybe there are differences as well. Yeah, I mean there's a lot to answer. I feel like we have like too many or like a lot of benchmarks and evals, but it's still at the same time not enough. So that's like
Yeah.
interesting problem.
There are so many, like it's such a new science, like benchmarking this kind of intelligence. It's like an alien one. So it's really hard. Like we don't know exactly what we are doing and what's important in every case. And for example, it's also hard to interpret the data. So for example, I could imagine that at the beginning, models with longer context windows write longer programs because they can handle it. And actually what I want is like smarter LLMs that write like shorter programs so they fit in my head. Like they don't have like ancillary. complexity, but they still work.
But also, I think developers now like combine the LLMs, right? Like usually people already work with different LLMs for very niche tasks, so it's not like before. I think people thought more than you just lock in the what LLM is currently winning the benchmarks, and you lock in there and just use this. I think like the cost of switching is like it's like natural for people to really combine a lot, like yeah, for like different things. So I think it doesn't really matter like if particular LM is the best. It's just like finding the mix probably, or that's how I see the market is also evolving.
Yeah. So now that you say like how the market is evolving, I would like to ask you, what are you the most excited about the next like 6 to 9 months in the space? What do you think that, like it's going to happen that it's going to make you happy?
Wow. In AI, like 6 months is like 6 years. Uh, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm excited about new LLMs, of course, better reasoning, better code gen. I think it's like we can feel it like improving. So I'm excited what would be possible. I think I'm excited also from the side of like users, like more bigger companies adopting the agents really for production. It's always really nice surprise for me because I feel like I'm talking to developers daily and being on Twitter, being in this bubble where like everyone knows, everyone uses it. But now, for example, at the hackathon, I talked to like biggest grocery delivery company in Czech Republic, and they implemented multi-agents. They build with Crew AI, they build multi-agent
Wow.
system in production, and they have pilots where they use the agents replacing marketing team partially for like thinking of campaigns. This is like, of course, it's like very, let's say, safe production use case. It's not like computer use or something that we see now, but it's still nice. They really like use it and it works, and it's like not, it's not like software company, it's like groceries. So so the most of the people there don't even know what agent is, and it's cool for me to see this like outside of my bubble use cases in production. So I would be very excited if I see, I don't know, computer use like this in 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah. After 3 years of this is the year of AI agents, I was a bit worried because I was like, okay, so this is the year of Linux in the desktop, that it just becomes a meme and it's year after year, like, and never is. But I think that 2025 is going to be remembered like, well, we went from 0 to 1. Like now we have like many, many agents doing these things.
Yeah.
What kind of things would you like to see disappearing actually? So people that are doing some stuff and you're like, well, guys, like this is like from the past. We already evolved. We can do this new way or just stop doing that.
I think the market maps. uh, what I would see disappearing. I think it's difficult because, like, for example, now people say maybe reg startups are dead or like building reg doesn't make sense, which I don't agree with that much. Like, of course, some when like some models are improved or OpenAI launch something, it's always like people think it will kill some of the startups. I think now it already happened a lot in the past. Like a lot of the agents already like ended or pivoted. So I wouldn't say now I want to see something disappear. I think it's just like natural evolution. Like some companies disappear, some are gonna make it like in the same field, but I don't see any like big, let's say, big part of the market disappearing. Maybe like from the like bigger view, maybe I think we will change how like internet is built and how like non-AI apps are built, because like the internet will be built more for agents, right? Already like agents are interacting with agents, so I think there will be like less need for some things on the web. Maybe it will change like also advertisements, right? Like what do you want to show, because you don't optimize now for humans and you will optimize for agents scraping your web, browsing your internet. So yeah, I think that's gonna change how people think about this.
That's a really good answer. So for closing, like we have been talking about AI agents for a while now, but we still don't know what an AI agent is. So in your terms, what do you think that an AI agent is?
Wow. Yeah, I think AI agent is app powered by LLM or program powered by LLM. It's autonomous, which means usually it can combine like reasoning and actions. And actions mean usually using tools, right? One of these tools can be using E2B, using code interpreter, using web search tools. Yeah, like autonomous AI assistant, I would say. But I think at this point, no one cares about the definition that much, or it's like too late to to establish. I think that's like very empirical definition. I think now it's like AI overall, it's like so natural and it's like everywhere that people started mentioning. Like now the products at the beginning the products were called like AI, something AI, and now AI is like very present everywhere. So I think similar thing with agents.
Yeah, I think that it's going to evolve like with the term computer. It's like, but what is a computer? And then there are people always that want to say like, well, but your phone is a computer. And then it's like, okay, yeah. And they say, well, your thermostat like actually has a lot of things like when, like when it starts being a microprocessor and when it jumps to a computer, it's always hard to decide. And I think that with AI agents, we want to see like more and more this clear
Yeah.
definition of I can see that this is not, I can see that this is, but then in the middle, people fighting say like, no, I don't think that this thing is.
Yeah, it's like
When in reality, most of the
defining,
people say.
like you can define what the components is and what the mechanisms are, like tools, of course, or stuff like that. Or you can define it by like what it can do, what capabilities it does, what it achieves, how it behaves. So there are like two directions probably, and I think it's good when it's meets in the middle and people just understand.
So far, what worked with me is vibe judging. So I just look at it and it's like, well, by the vibes, this is an
Oh,
agent or
okay.
this is not
Yeah,
an
I
agent.
mean, of course, there is like, I think agents are also like a feature, right? It's not, I think that's like one mistake, just like making equivalent agent is like the company or the product. It's not usually like that. I think that's what is important to mention when defining.
Excellent, Teresa. So thank you very much for your time. I had a lot of fun and
Thank
looking
you.
forward to see the next 6 to 9 months in the environment and see your product grow.
Thank you very much. It was great to chat. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, Teresa. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.